Lovely. Well, good morning and welcome to a Learn to Fish video. And I'm on the river today and I'm going to give you a crash course in how to catch winter chub. So I'm going to cover the tackle you need, the rigs you use, the baits and a little bit of watercraft. I'm going to give you a head start if you want to try some chub fishing this winter. Well, it was nice to get a bite almost straight away. I think that was my second cast in the first swim this morning, and that's the beauty of chub fishing. When you're in the right swim, the bites come fairly quickly. And the river today is up and coloured. It was almost in full flood yesterday, and it's now dropped down a little bit. That brings me nicely to bait choice for chub in the winter time. Now, by a mile, my favourite winter chub bait has to be cheese paste, especially when the river's coloured like this. That's the only bait I've brought with me today. But once this colour drops out a little bit, I'll sometimes swap over to bread flake. And then the one last bait that I've done quite well on is half a lobworm. And the beauty of using lobworms when you're chub fishing, if you're fishing a river that's got one or two big perch, you might catch a nice big perch as a byproduct of your chub fishing. So I'm going to put another big lump of cheese paste on, cast it back out, and let's see if we can catch another one. Bit of a move down to a nice bit of slack water, maybe 100 yards down from that first swim, and a couple of little taps, and I'm into my second chub of the day. And whilst I'm playing it, I'll talk you through the hardware that I'm using. I've got a 12-foot rod, because you can see they fight a bit dirty chub. They're always trying to get under your own bank. So having this 12-foot rod at arm's length, I can keep them out from getting under the bank and keep control of them. But as well as a rod that will cope with the chub, you need bite indication. Now this rod comes with 3 pushing glass squiver tips. It's an Advanta barbel rod, but it's perfect for chub fishing. Let's just net the chub. Well, another immaculate chub, not a massive fish, but in absolutely top condition and really nice to see on my local rivers. But I got rudely interrupted telling you about the setup that I'm using, because I just wanted to concentrate and get this in the net safely. So I'll slip this little fella back, I'm going to cast the rod back out, then I'll continue telling you about my setup. Well, with the river being in flood today, probably the nicest way to put these chub back with my long land and net handle is just to ship them out past the edge of the reeds, and then just turn the net inside out and let them swim out of the net. And another quick tip, I always like to return the chub a little bit away from where I've caught them. I've come probably 50-60 yards upriver, because I find if I don't put them back in the swim I've just caught them from, sometimes I get another fish out of the same swim. Lovely. Well, now that the rod's cast back out, I'm going to continue telling you about the rod that I'm using, but you'll have to excuse me if I keep glancing away and looking at the quiver tip, because with chub fishing, it's all about striking at exactly the right time. And that's why you want glass quiver tips and you want quite soft quiver tips. I think I've got a 2-ounce one in there today, and there is a lot of extra water on the river, but having a nice, sensitive, soft glass quiver tip means that when the chub pick the bait up and they move off with it, they feel less resistance. If the rod's too stiff, as they pick the bait up and they move away, sometimes they'll drop it because they'll feel the tension of the rod tip. So use the softest quiver tip you can get away with, and it helps if you use glass quiver tips rather than carbon quiver tips. Well, there we go, there's another bite. Trying to get under my own bank again, which is exactly why I use an 8-pound main line. There are 1 or 2 bigger chub in this river, and so that they go safely in my landing net just like that. I don't mess about. 8-pound main line and a slightly thinner hook link that we'll talk about a bit later when I talk about the rigs. Well, that just proves the importance of keeping on the move. It pays to be fairly impatient when you're chub fishing, which is probably why I like it so much. If you're in the right swim with a big lump of smelly cheese paste and you put it somewhere near the chub, you'll get a bite fairly quickly. So if you've sat in a swim too long without any activity on the rod tip, no bites at all, keep on the move, because if you're in the right spot, it will happen quite fast. But it's time to talk a little bit about location when it comes to chub fishing. And I think what I've learned over the years, the truth of the matter is, they can sit in lots of different places on the river, and the best thing to do is explore the river, keep on the move. Even if a swim doesn't look brilliant, it's always worth just dropping in there for 15 minutes. We've had a couple of fish today off some very bland looking straight sections of the river. But the biggest feature for me has to be what the flow is doing. Because the river's in flood today, I've been trying to find some slightly calmer water. If I cast this out in the main flow, it just bounces around into the edge. So I'm fishing these little creases off the edge of the main flow, and that's where I'm getting the bites. Another feature that a lot of people think of when they think of chub fishing is overhanging trees and cover, and they definitely like a little bit of cover, but I'm not always drawn to the trees as much as other chub anglers. The feature that I like the most is what the current's doing and these lovely creases that are formed off the main current. Well, I've moved about 2 miles upstream, and you can really see how flooded the river is up here. It's across the fields, which makes me think it's just on the cusp of being fishable. If it was any higher than this, it'd probably be even more difficult fishing. But despite that, the chub have been feeding. We've had a few this morning, and I've told Amanda if I can get a bite along this stretch, hopefully it'll be a bit of a bigger fish. But before I cast out, let's talk about the rig itself. Chub rigs are nice, simple rigs. I've got a run ring on my 8-pound main line, a really small run ring, coming down to a buffer bead with a swivel that sits inside the buffer bead. Then off that run ring, personally I like to have a little paternostered boom of maybe 4 or 6 pound line. Then I tie my little weight on there with quite a weak knot. I think that's a 2 or a 3 turn blood knot, because I want the weight to be able to pull off and break off if it gets snagged in something when I'm playing the fish. The hook link itself, I like quite a long hook link. I guess that's at least 2 foot. And that's a slightly thinner diameter main line. That's Preston power line in 0.19 that breaks at just over 7 pound. And then for cheese paste fishing, a nice big size 4 hook, which gets lost in a big lump of cheese paste. I like quite a fine wire hook, because when I get that bite and I strike, it pulls out the paste easier. It makes it easier to set the hook. Well, it seems the further I went upriver today, the more the flood water was hitting the river. It was across the fields, so I've come back to the original spot to just cope with this flood water better. But what I want to talk about, now I've got that rod back out, is the bites themselves. Now, chub bites, because you're not using bolt rigs, you're using those traditional little link ledger rigs, could be quite tentative little bites. That's why we use soft glass quiver tips, so we can pick up those bites. And the typical chub bite, I really like them. You get a couple of little taps as the chub mouths the bait. Then once it moves off with the bait, it'll just pull around that little bit more, and that's when you need a nice firm strike. You need to strike quite hard. You've got to pull the hook out of the bait and set the hook yourself. So it involves that extra skill set that isn't needed with bolt rig fishing, and that's what I like about chub fishing. And the last thing I want to add, you might notice on my quiver tip, I've got an isotope on the rod. A lot of my chub fishing is after dark, and that isotope helps me fish in the dark. I also like it in the daytime. It gives me something to focus on and pick those bites up even better. Let's move. Last chance saloon. We'll go down near that bend again and see if we can find a bit of slack. Well, I think I'm going to make this the last fish of the day. I've been typical stubborn feeling. Been having one more cast for about the last 3 swims. But hopefully you've enjoyed this video today. Hopefully it's given you a few tips on how to land a few winter chub. But don't forget all the products, terminal tackle and the hardware. We've made it nice and easy for you. And I've put the links in the description below. He's a right little poser, this one.